Joe Sebok, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about Limit Holdem. Now, Joe just won the $2,500 limit event at the Commerce, so he knows a lot about it. Joe, tell me about Limit Holdem.
Wow, that's open-ended. I don't know that I know that much about Limit Holdem. It's what I came up with, cutting my teeth on before I started playing all the no-limit tournaments. But basically, it is just what it sounds like. It's the game of Holdem, only the betting increments are in limit. So what it does is it becomes more of a math game. It's a much more mathematical game in terms of it's much more difficult to push people off of hands. It's much tougher to come in with garbage with the intention of later on, putting a big move on somebody. Because ultimately, they usually have to call one bet. So if folding on the end, these big, huge folds, on the river don't occur nearly as often. And for the most part, you just play solid and you play a lot slower, and that usually is what gets the money in these limit events.
Okay, so I've heard that you're not supposed to limp in limit. You should either come in raising or fold. Do you think that's an accurate statement?
See, maybe for some people, it's all about how you play. For me, it's quite the opposite. I will limp in limit with certain hands, versus in no limit, I never limp. But, again, different people say different things. A lot of people do limp in no limit, and it's just not something that I do. But I think it's fine, especially if you're, if you're up top, if you're, under the gun or in one of those early positions and you've got a small pair. I often will limp with, 5s or 6s. The reason being, you're basically usually playing those in limit to, flop some sort of big draw or to flop a set. So rather than bring it in for a raise, then get re-raised, have to call 3 bets, and having to call 3 bets total, I'd rather bring it in. A lot of times, as a lot of poker players know, when you limp, everyone else limps behind you. So then you get away with just coming in for 1 bet. And if someone raises you, you can just call, and so it's just a 2. So that way you're saving in a lot of those spots.
So what about a time, say you're on the button and it's folded around to you, do you make a bet like you would in no limit, even though you can't make a larger bet, just try to drive people out, or is it not a good place to try and take down a pot?
So basically, are you asking me if you steal, basically?
Basically.
You don't steal nearly as much because it's so difficult. Inevitably, what happens is you're going to make your bet, you're inevitably going to get called from the big blind, and if you're really truly stealing with garbage, you end up just, having garbage hand that if you hit, maybe you're in trouble, maybe you're not. It's really hard to figure out. So the stealing is not nearly as much. Like I said, it becomes more of a math game, so you end up figuring out what makes sense, maybe king suited, queen suited. These are hands that you play late. But I'm still, even if I'm on the button and I have something like 9 deuce, I'm going to fold that. In a typical limit game, of course, if you're playing in a tournament and it keeps going, then the blinds come into play, then there is more stealing. It becomes a little more like no limit because, again, you're putting so much of your money in.
Yeah.
And so that changes things a little bit. But certainly in a cash game and in the beginning of a tournament, I'm not stealing, with garbage in late position.
So what would be your best advice for a novice limit player?
My best advice is just to play. It's like with any other form of poker. Just sit down, play limits that are comfortable to you in a cash game if that's what you're doing, and learn the game. I honestly think learning the game of Holdem in a limit setting is much, much easier just to understand, the hand values and, the different rankings and this hand is worth this much here and this hand is worth this much here. You really get to understand position a lot better than you do in no limit. Because always in no limit, you can blow people off hands. You can always move in. It's the great equalizer with that. But in limit, you can't. So it's going to teach you to be a much better, a much more patient poker player. So just play. Play as much as you can, and just pay attention, and it'll teach you to be patient. It's going to help you out with your game overall.
I've also heard that the check raise is a valuable limit hold'em tool because it is a way to get more money in the pot, get around the structure. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. The check raise is a huge tool in limit for several reasons. One, when you have a hand, you get more money in.
Okay.
When you don't have a hand, you can sometimes get somebody off their hand. Maybe you choose to check on the turn. They think they have you. Really, they're sitting on ace queen high on the board. It's jack 10. Some kind of garbage. Your check raise seems so strong. So it really is a way to play. In terms of psychology, it really is a way that you can get after people and kind of fool them into thinking you have a stronger hand, you have a weaker hand. So the check raise is a huge tool in limit.
And how important is position in limit hold'em as opposed to no limit?
I think it's actually more important, again, because you have to remember in no limit, you've got the all-ins, you've got the great equalizer where you can blow that stuff away, but in limit you can't. Position, that person is going to have to check you. You're going to get to see what all these people are doing. The pots generally have more people in them, so you're going to require more information to kind of disseminate what's going on.
Okay.
You know that no limit pots, usually it's 2, maybe 3. In limit, it's 4 or 5. It can be as big as it can possibly be.
Yeah.
So again, it's just getting more information so that way you have more stuff that you can work with.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to me about Limit.
No problem.
This is Lizzie Harrison and Joe Sebok talking about Limit Hold'em for Card Player TV.